team. Bit of technical issues today. Not really sure what is going on, but anyway, I will wait for Lib to jump back on and then I'll add her back in and we can carry on. Let me see what I can do. There she is, Libby.
Hi.
Hey, sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, so sorry, you're talking about losing your identity.
Yes, so what were we saying? What to do when you lose your identity?
Yeah,
Yes, so I think it's really normal that this can happen. And so how do we go about doing that? Number one is acknowledging that we are still a person. We may not feel like a person. We might feel like a hot mess, but we're still a person. And so number one is identifying that. Two is, it might sound a bit dicky, but I'm all for having a journal. It's not to write really long sentences for yourself because you probably can't even form them at this point. But it's just having a space to start with of saying, that's where I'm going to jot down any ideas I might have for what I want to do to look after myself. So a strategy I really like to do with people at any point in their life, and we know it works, and particularly for mums, is having a think about 4 different life areas. So if we think about your health, we think about your work/study, what you like to do for fun, and your relationships, those 4 areas, and think about what you value in those areas. So say for work/study, I value helping people, I value being challenged, and go through those 4 life areas, thinking about what you value, and then having a think about, okay, in the next 12 to 24 months, what are some goals I might want to set in those areas? So we know that we can start to reshape how we want to be in the world and valuing ourselves by looking at what we value in those areas and setting goals based on them. And I can really appreciate being a time-poor, sleep-deprived mum. It might be hard to start to do that, but it could be as simple as, you know what, I want to learn more about sewing or Buddhism or something, and saying, okay, I'm going to grab a book on that. Grab a book from the library, buy a book, go to the op shop and get a book. And it's just starting to say when the kids sleep, if they ever do that, or at night for an hour, I'm going to start to read that. And what that's doing is you're taking an action in line with something you value, and you're not only giving yourself some energy, but you're starting to kind of reshape your identity a little bit as, I'm a mother and a person. I can do both, and my identity doesn't have to be solely wrapped up in being a mother, which, you know, probably 99% of it does because you're with them so much, but you can save 1% or hopefully a bit more of just, it's carving out that time for yourself.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things I really struggled with was I felt like before I had Grace, I was a very capable person who could achieve a lot in a day.
Oh, yes.
And then you have this baby and you get fucking nothing done. Like that, I found that a real struggle, and I felt like, I don't know, just like I was a failure, like I just wasn't doing anything. There was no purpose. I had no purpose. Obviously, keeping that in mind is a purpose, but yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that, you know, brings up a really good point around, generally as women, you know, we've gone from feeling a sense of productivity and accomplishment in our day. You know, you go to work, you get done. That's great, and that's good for our mood and our identity as well. We get thrown into the trenches of motherhood, and if we don't adjust our expectations, if we don't adjust our kind of daily task list, and we are more at risk of postnatal depression and not feeling great in ourselves because we haven't adjusted our expectations. I think if you think you've lowered the bar, I would say go lower. the expectations. That's like
100%.
no, the expectations need to be, if we're saying to ourselves, feed the baby, I'm going to do the washing, I'm going to do the prep, I'm going to get the food, I'm going to send that email to that person, I'm also going to read that book, do a bit of study. No. If you're keeping that baby human alive throughout the day and you're fed and watered as well, like that, you've kicked some goals that day. So, and we know that women who are prone to perfectionism are more at risk of postnatal depression. So, yes, I think self-identity after kids is a big thing. And I definitely went through this after having my second, with obviously having postnatal anxiety and postnatal depression. And I think another thing to try and keep in mind through that period as you're trying to find who you are again is having self-compassion, having acceptance around where you're at right now. It's totally understandable and totally normal. You may not be knowing, like what you said before, which way up and which way down. Like, you might just be a bit all over the place, and giving yourself time to find that, that you don't have to figure out who you are and your new self-identity straight away. If it takes 2 years, it takes 2 years, but you can move that process along by, starting to carve out little snippets of time for yourself and starting to think about what you value. And I think as women, it's really important to challenge our mind in some ways, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure does. How to break the emotional eating and boredom habit?
That's a good question. Still I'm kidding. So I mean, emotional eating, boredom eating, obviously that can come up. I think one of the things is if we're not doing enough, this might sound odd, but if we're not doing enough that interests us, if we're not taking care of ourselves, and I mean taking care of ourselves similar to what I was just saying before about doing activities that are in line with what we value. So a big part of why emotional eating, boredom eating, binge eating can come up is because we're not doing the good stuff to take care of ourselves. And we're trying to force food down our gob to try and feel better. We're trying to shove it down to numb emotions, to forget something, to feel better. So why don't we engage as a bit of a preventative measure some really good stuff around, I'm going to read a book, I'm going to play a game, I'm going to do some exercise. So, number one is just assessing your situation. How are you going with actually doing the things to take care of you? And, I feel like emotional eating and boredom eating kind of ties in a little bit to binge eating as well. And one of the biggest factors that leads to binge eating is physiological malnourishment. So what we can often see with women in particular, if we're in a space of saying, I'm not going to eat X, Y, and Z, I'm going to cut my calories, or whatever it might be, 9 times out of 10, it's like, pulling a rubber band back. You're going to be binging before you know it, because your body physiologically is saying, I need more than this. So that's just like a basic practical thing to kind of check off of, are you eating enough food? And you probably know a bit more about that than I do, Shan, in terms of just that, our needs physically, and women just need.
I think a lot of that too. Oh my God, are you getting terrible feedback?
A little bit. I could handle it.
It's repeating. Every time I talk, it's repeating what I say. This is driving you back. Okay, I'm going to try and push through. What was I going to say? I think a lot of the times as well, when we tend to binge eat, what we tend to go for at that time, like you said, our body's lacking in nutrients. we're also probably, because of that lack of nutrients, we're feeling down, we're feeling our mood's a bit shit. So we reach for things that are highly satiating, highly satisfying to that part of our brain that's going to light up. It's going to be sugar.
Yes.
So I think a lot of the time people are binge eating, that's what they're reaching for.
Yes. Absolutely. And I think it's it hits that reward center. So if we know if our emotions are in check because we're feeling good in ourselves, we're doing actions in line with our values, we're exercising, not in a crazy intense way, but just in a way to have endorphins running around. If we're connected in our social relationships, so just if we're doing things to manage our emotions, we're less likely to go to emotional eating or binge eating or boredom eating. But and another strategy to use, I suppose, and this one can be tricky, but like anything, if you practice it, you can master it. And I'm big on this at the moment. It's just forethought. Like, it sounds so simple of just saying, I just need to think ahead, but no, you really do need to think ahead. Like, if you know that you've had a big day at work, it's been pretty shitty, you're coming home and you're thinking, I'm going to stop at the petrol station and grab a few chocolate bars and a packet of chips or whatever it might be, it's saying, okay, I'm feeling exhausted and tired. What else might make me feel good? Because I know if I use my forethought and I eat that packet of chips and the 3 chocolate bars and whatever else I'm going to grab, I'm going to feel horrendous afterwards, physically, and then the guilt ensues, which then keeps this cycle going. So forethought is amazing. You know, when we just start to think, hang on a second, if I just follow that train of thought, go through with that action, how am I going to feel afterwards? Terrible. What's a better action I can choose right now? What's going to take care of it right now? Does that make sense?
And I think it's, you want that sugar, you've got that craving. Have the forethought to think, I will make some bliss balls, or I'll make a healthy option that's still going to fill that need for having something sweet, but not, make you feel like full of self-loathing afterwards.
Absolutely. So, I mean, that's another practical strategy is if you're feeling like, and, potentially maybe your body is in a state where it needs more calories as well. Maybe your body's screaming out for it. And, if it's having bliss balls, I go hard as on cashew butter sometimes, and that's okay. Like, horrendous for me. It's not going to kill me. It's not going to clog my arteries up. But that's a better choice than the 4 chocolate bars I could have consumed instead. So, it's having forethought or having foods planned out that is not going to send you into a blood sugar tailspin.
Yeah. I've got to try again, Liv. I can't.
It's okay. We'll try again.
Killing me.
I'm still here.
Back in a sec.